recording our conversation simply because we know some people were not going to be available to talk with us today at 3 o'clock. Just wanted to be sure that we do record this and we'll be able to share it with our employees broadly. Although we also know things will change. That's Listen, if I've learned nothing else from being the chancellor, it is that being adaptable is the best attribute to have because we're having to do it all the time. No one in the interview process warned me, as they may have warned you, Daniel, about a global pandemic. But I would absolutely choose to be here on our worst days versus anywhere else on their best days.
That
So,
would have been handy if they'd have warned us.
yeah, it would have been nice to know. We could have been preparing.
Yeah, a little bit.
Right. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started then with the presentation. And so let me tell you a little bit about how I plan to approach this. I had several people submit questions in advance of this conversation, and I really appreciate that. So if you did submit a question in advance to Chelsea, thank you so much. It helped prompt some of the conversation we'll have today. And big thanks to Chelsea for gathering that information and categorizing it so that we were ready to respond to some of those questions. They will not answer all of your questions because you may have some questions we haven't thought of yet. I would be surprised if that was not true. And so we'll obviously save a bit of time at the end for any other questions, or if you want to dive deeper into any of the content that I'm going to share with you, be happy to answer your questions. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Pay no attention to how very many of these types of things I have going at any given time. And let me see if I can move this back. All right. And so I hope you can all see my screen. Yes. Just give me a nod if you can. Okay. And it says employee open forum. Fabulous. Okay. So let me tell you about our situational analysis. Obviously, from today, we are exactly 3 weeks out from the first day of our fall term. It's just impossible for me to even wrap my arms or my mind around that. It's crazy that that's happened so quickly. We do know that we'll have a lot of opening activities happening a week before school starts. We've got university days, we have people moving into residence halls, we have Cup Camp, we have people showing up for athletics for just all kinds of reasons. And so, and we also know our faculty who are on 9-month contracts will be here for university days as of the 19th. So we just have a ton of activity happening over the next few weeks of our campus. We also know that we are grappling with some real increases in the cases of COVID-19, primarily due to the Delta variant. Although we have, as a community, kind of pushed out a lot of safety protocols and things, we have seen an increase in hospitalizations and, quite unfortunately, in deaths in the state of Arkansas, as well as within our region. And so, based on some of these increases, we felt like it was incredibly important to have an open forum where we talk about the concerns and challenges that we face as a campus and allow you to ask the kinds of questions that you have as well, to share some information with you. And so I am just showing you a basic screenshot from the Arkansas Department of Health website. That website is typically updated on a daily basis. The cases that you see here do reflect caseload as of yesterday. And the reason is that at the most recent time that I could check that website, about an hour ago, they still had that data as their most recent data. It may have been updated since that time, but ultimately this is the most accurate information to this point. So it's time to kind of set up for you the conditions of operation as a state. I know many of you followed our legislative cycle very closely, and some of you have participated in conversations about safety on campus, about COVID-19. Some of you are watching this very closely in the news as well. So I'm just going to very briefly summarize for you some of the legislation that was passed and became law this past legislative session in the spring. So the first of those is the Arkansas Law Act 1030. And this act prohibits us from requiring vaccine passports. So we are not able to have any requirement that someone has to give us proof, which is what the vaccine passport is. It's your vaccine card or immunization card. People call them all different types of things. But for this legislative purpose, it was called a vaccine passport. We're not allowed to ask for those as part of a state agency, particularly not as it relates to the purpose of entry, travel, education, or services. And so that's the first of its type. But we also had Act 977, which prohibits the state from mandating a vaccine or an immunization, and further indicates that receiving a vaccine for COVID-19 will not be a condition of employment. So again, we're not able to mandate vaccines for any purpose for education or employment within the institution. And so those are the two particular pieces of legislation that did pass, that became law as a result of the session, that are directly related to COVID-19 vaccinations. There is a third law that did pass, Act 1002, prohibits a state agency, which includes higher education agencies, from mandating the use of face coverings, face masks, and face shields as a condition of education, entry, employment, etc. And I think many of you are following this very closely, especially as we get closer to the opening of K through 12 education, which will occur a week before we go back into session on the 23rd. So they begin on the 16th. And the implication is that many of the K through 12 educators, leaders within our state have asked questions about the ability to mandate wearing masks in those schools, primarily because they have people who are under the age of 12 where they are not yet eligible for vaccinations. So they see it as a potential safety protocol for those who are youngest and not yet eligible for the vaccine. As a result of multiple cries from people about having a further discussion on this particular issue, Governor Hutchinson did call a special session, which will occur tomorrow. And so we will know more tomorrow whether or not there is any appetite from any of the legislators to consider amending this particular legislation. So to be clear, in order to make a change to this particular legislation, 2/3 of the House and Senate would have to vote favorably for an amendment to take place. So that's something that I think many legislators who've been quoted in the news lately said is they believe that's an uphill battle to get 2/3 who are agreeable to this. And there is no guarantee that even if they do hear this and make any changes, that higher education would be enjoined in it. The primary audience for the conversation is K through 12 education, which we may or may not fall in alignment with based on concurrent enrollment, WOTC programs, et cetera, that are happening in the schools versus happening on our grounds. So we'll just keep that in mind. And last but not least, where we feel some constraint in higher education for mandating really anything or changing much, is the Board of Trustees of the University of Arkansas system. So 4-year and 2-year institutions are governed by this Board of Trustees. On March the 19th, they met and unanimously passed a resolution that required the institutions to go back to face-to-face education this fall. Now, again, this occurred in March of 2021. As a result of many changes since that time, there is a possibility that the trustees may change the direction in which they expect the campuses to go for education. But the primary reasons that they passed this resolution unanimously was to send a very clear message to students, families, to educators, that they wanted people to be back face-to-face for education. And they believed that individuals who were forced to move their educational environments online were not as engaged, and ultimately or potentially losing some opportunities for education that might exist if they were able to fully utilize face-to-face classroom experiences and the whole campus environment. So we have done a little bit of preliminary work, and I really appreciate the quick review that Jane and Lee Crable put into this. and have not found significant differences in performance or in probation or suspension statuses of our students this spring of 2021 as compared to the spring of 2019. I would have expected to see a considerable number of students who didn't make satisfactory academic progress in comparison to 2 years ago, but pre-pandemic, and that just was not the case. And so what we have seen instead is people who are voting with their feet. They are just not enrolling in higher education. And so we have seen numbers decline not only here, but across our state in 4-year and 2-year institutions. So the truth is, after this resolution passed by the trustees, and I shared that information with our campus and in our community, we had a 7% increase in applications for admission that week alone. Now we are still somewhat below where we would have even been last year in terms of our enrollment, but this is very volatile, literally changing day by day as we have new student orientations or have people coming in for appointments to register, or as we are able to help them financially so that they are clearing their past due balances and it opens them up for enrollment. So just wanted you to be aware that this resolution does exist and we do have to work within the confines of it, but it is the one that I think is most likely to allow for some flexibility in the future. Although the trustees do not plan to meet again for a normal board meeting until September. In August, on the 10th and 11th, they will have a board retreat, but it is mostly an informational and educational session for them where they're learning policies and practices of the state and of our system. So I do not know if this will be a topic of conversation or if they'll have other consideration. So I'm going to summarize. What you've heard is there are laws that do not allow us to require vaccinations or any proof therein. We have a law that says we cannot require masks to be worn, and we are supposed to be back to fully face-to-face in our educational and activity environments for this fall. So that sets us up for the environment. So then the questions. The first question really came to us in terms of campus mitigation, like what are you doing and what have you done to keep us safe and make us ready for this? You're all aware of the fact that we've hosted vaccination clinics on our campus, which is one of the ways that we've been informed keeps people safe from COVID-19. And we held one community vaccination clinic just last Monday and had less than 60 people who attended. Now, I really attribute that primarily to the fact that many people who wanted to get the vaccine are able to get it in so many different locations. So even people who are still seeking out the vaccine are able to do so at most pharmacies, clinics, and our 2 local hospitals. So this was more of a clinic of convenience for people who live in this area or who wanted to leave work or live on campus and wanted to go. So I'm not terribly disappointed in that number. I feel like it's always worth it if we can provide convenience and safety for someone. Of course, we're going to continue to recommend masks, but they are not required. So people who choose to wear masks may do so, and that really should not indicate to any of us if I choose to wear a mask, whether or not I've been vaccinated. I may be vaccinated and wearing a mask. I may not be vaccinated and choose to wear a mask. Or conversely, I just may not choose to wear one. And so we will recommend wearing of masks, especially as it follows the guidelines set out by the CDC and the Arkansas Department of Health. Even people who are vaccinated are encouraged to wear masks, even indoors. So, or potentially in large groups. And so just thought I would mention that. We have provided a considerable amount of PPE and we will continue to do so for this fall. We have a protocol that we'll be following to put our PPE out into classrooms, into residence hall rooms, at offices, and just generally and pretty liberally across the campus, you'll be able to get your hands on disposable masks. I don't know if we have anybody who wants to kind of model for us our new mask for the university with our new logo on it. Kerry Tucker did a beautiful job earlier of modeling himself in that mask. So I feel like we got 2 for 1, CFO and model. which is fabulous. Keep that in mind. Chris Kelly, as you and Rachel are doing photography for campus. But it's really important for him and his team to get that distributed out so that people aren't going looking for hand sanitizer or looking for wipes to wipe things down and stay safer. That they're available and readily accessible in every building will be important. Plus, it gives them some access back to their storage room, which we have really taken over with PPE. We have lots and lots of pallets of it. Our new employees who come on this fall, particularly at new faculty orientation, but also new staff members, should receive our Pride Packs that others of you received during our brand launch that have those masks that have our new logo, as well as having the bag, the coffee mug, and the coupon to go and get the shirt and sticker. Those are all contained in a really cool bag, and hope you'll pick yours up. Or faculty will receive them at the new faculty orientation. And one thing that I have to give a huge shout out to our student health clinic. They really have stepped up, and they have indicated they will continue to do any COVID-19 testing, not only of students, which is who were contracted to serve with that group, but also of our employees. So if ever you're feeling ill or showing any symptoms, you have no idea if the symptoms are the same as COVID-19 or similar, and you just want to have reassurance or reassure others in your family or at work, you can go and get a COVID-19 test at our student health clinic on campus. So those are some of the things that we are doing for our campus to reduce risks. Offices. So again, I'm going to run through this fairly quickly just to leave plenty of time for questions. But in our offices, staff are supposed to work their assigned locations during what we'll call normal operating hours. Now that can be very different depending on the organization. So I'll say normal working hours, but it's really the hours for which you are particularly scheduled. For example, we have people in our university police who work overnight, but that's their normally scheduled hours. We have people who work in the library and may be scheduled to work on a weekend, but not during the week. We have people who are working 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, and some who stagger hours on certain days to work in the evenings. And so whatever your actual assignment for your job duty is where you're expected to be beginning, when school starts and actually before that time. Offices will not be closed as a result of any new variant. At this point, we will continue to serve students both in person, but also online. And so it's absolutely acceptable that if you have students who want to make appointments and you want to make them with the student online, or they may drop in or want to meet with you in person, that you're able to accommodate both modalities. The question that was asked was, can we move all of our appointments to online? Probably not. We will have a lot of students who are showing up on campus over the next couple of weeks, and we'll definitely see more drop-in traffic, lots of one-on-one engagement with those individuals. And so we do need to keep our offices open for that reason. So we'll continue to serve them in person, but also to set things up online. You may set up your office spaces to the best of your ability to provide some physical distancing. I know that's something that has helped us considerably where that's possible. You may also want to identify spaces for meetings in your building where you could take a student and have some distance in a conference room or another room that's not in use. That way you can provide a distance and have a safer conversation with that individual. You may put up signs encouraging people to wear masks. You cannot require it, but you can encourage people to wear masks when they come to your office. Quite frankly, we know that masks are somewhat effective in helping to protect ourselves or help us to protect other people so that we're not shedding the virus. If that's true and you feel more confident or comfortable wearing a mask in your meetings, but also putting up the signage, completely fine. But no one, and I mean this, no one should feel bullied or harassed based on their personal decisions about vaccines or wearing masks. I was really saddened to read a comment that came through when people were contributing their questions. And to be fair, I did not want to know who contributed which questions. Just felt like that was, in the best interest of everyone involved or included. So I truly don't know who posed this point, but that some people feel very attacked by people within their office spaces or within the confines of their work, where they're being asked, are you vaccinated? Or if they're sharing that they are not, that they are being treated badly. And what I told our senior staff, I brought this up this morning and explained, we spend more hours every day with each other and at work and on this campus than we do with our families and people we love with all our hearts. Even more than I spend with my cats. Don't tell my children. And the truth is that we should be kinder and better to one another than that. People will have had to make some pretty tough choices in this environment. And many people think they know what is best for them. Great. But that does not mean you know what is best for everyone. And I think we just need to keep that in mind, that the people we work with are bright, they are caring, that we rely heavily on them. The last thing we want to do is for someone to feel devalued through these types of conversations. And so please be really careful about any conversations you're having in the workplace and respect the fact that people get an opportunity to make choices. Okay, let's see. In classrooms. In our classrooms, we have maximum capacities that are established actually by fire code. And the classrooms are going to be set to accommodate the normal pre-COVID capacities. So when you walk into a classroom, you're going to see that the seats are set up like they would have been before COVID. What we are hopeful for, where possible, is that if fewer people are actually assigned into a class in a space, that if the faculty member in that classroom wants to have students rearranging the seating or sitting in a certain way that it provides some additional distancing, that they feel free to do that. That's absolutely fine. They have every ability, unless of course it's fixed seating, but even then staggering who is seated in which place is completely fine. Because it's not requiring vaccines or masks, and it does potentially provide some distance. And so faculty should definitely feel that they can do that. As well, you should have the ability to do that if you enter to give a presentation, or you walk in and you see that people are clustered together in a space. You can certainly encourage that they might want to provide some social distance. But again, not ask about vaccine status or tell them that they must wear masks. Based on classroom capacity, we cannot guarantee enough empty seats though to allow for distancing. So we just talked about the fact that we have a resolution from the Board of Trustees requiring us to return to face-to-face education. I'm certainly respectful of the fact that they chose to do that, but doing so in order to actually provide social distancing in classrooms, but to accommodate the demand that we have from students, we would probably have to double or triple our faculty numbers at the institution. Now, I have a lot of colleagues across the institution that would say, good, super, let's do that. The truth is, 3 weeks out from when school starts, there is no way we would be able to do that. It would be financially improbable that we could afford it, but more importantly, to find people with the qualifications and availability to do this 3 weeks before school begins makes it impossible for us to even consider. So again, we will do our very best to provide classroom spaces that are larger, that have capacity for some distancing, and certainly encourage and empower our faculty members to try to distance people in classrooms to the very best of their ability. If we find that by moving a class to another location, it gives additional space, we may be able to do that as well. So you may see a classroom assignment, it could change if we're able to identify a larger room or space for someone to meet. So that's something that we will continuously be working on at the beginning of school. For our faculty, a resolution came forward from our faculty senate that made very good sense to myself and to the provost. We're very encouraged to read it. And basically what the senate asked was, isn't it possible that instead of saying how many of the office hours we have must be face-to-face sitting in my office, that what I could do instead would be to publish in syllabi my actual policy on my office hours and how I can be reached during those office hours. And so let's say I've got a certain number of hours that I could be reached via Zoom, or I have an open, calendar, and you can calendar yourself in for 15 or 30-minute time slots on certain days. Perhaps they take appointments through EAB Navigate. Could be I'll be in my office at these times and days, and I'll be online these times and days. The truth is, our faculty, no matter what, have been available way more hours than anything they ever publish. They're often beyond what is reasonable available to our students almost 24/7 because of electronic devices and the ability to chat in social media privately, or to send emails and get responses all the time. So I still encourage people to have a balance between when they are working and when they are not. And I love the fact that the Senate came forward with the resolution saying that they would just publish what their actual availability will be, but please try to stick to that if possible, because as faculty, that's the only way you'll have any kind of balance. Classroom conversations about COVID-19. Someone asked, like, what can we actually say? What's allowable given the rules and the laws? And so, again, I think we'll have lots of questions from students as we start back into school, and it makes sense that on the first day or even a couple of days of class, people will have more questions for you as faculty members. If so, certainly explaining, here's the caseload that we're seeing, here is the law, here are possible ways to protect yourself if you choose to use them. But ultimately, the guidance should come from credible sources, of course, just as you would expect for students to cite their sources, you'll want to do the same. And students should not be told that they're required to get vaccines or to wear masks. They should also not leave a classroom feeling like they've been told they're idiots for not getting vaccines or wearing masks. I think we have a few people that fear that that would be the case. I don't believe that would be true for our faculty. I can't imagine that classroom environment. So I just want to be sure, though, that I said it out loud for the group. And it is really helpful to be ready to transition to online formats as the need arises for you as a faculty member. So if you became ill or you became quarantined, it would be great if you have content that you can transition to online format. That isn't always possible. But the technology that we have now that we did not have available to us when the pandemic began is it's exponentially more. We have a 3-year contract with Zoom. Of course, you have Blackboard classes that are right now scheduled to be offered face-to-face do not have Blackboard shells created. So for faculty who believe that they want to use Blackboard or Blackboard Collaborate, for example, or just want to populate it in the off chance that they'll need to transition to it at some point, may certainly request one to be created for the class, but we don't do that preemptively. So you would have to make that request. Those that do have a hybrid listing or an online listing, of course, they do have those shells already created, and possibly you've already archived or moved the content into those shells. But just want to be sure that you know that's available to you. And of course, anything you can do to be adaptable, as we talked about earlier, is really helpful. Students. So I had the question asked, so if a student shows up and appears to be sick, what can we do? And of course, you may privately approach the student, ask if they're not feeling well, encourage them to go home to rest or to go to the student health clinic or to seek out some medical advice. To my knowledge, I don't know of any policy that says you can't make them leave, but I also don't know of one that says you can. I do know that we're trying to prevent big confrontation over it. And typically people who don't feel well, who have attended anyway, just believe they're going to miss something so incredibly important that they can't bear to miss it. Now that's great teaching, I'm sure. I, as a paying college student, would have said, I paid for the class. I got to stay. What if I miss something for the test? What if I miss a test? What if I miss a quiz? What if what you say is absolutely brilliant? And I think it will be. I'm here for it. Sniffle, sniffle, cough, cough. encourage me to go home and tell me you'll be able to help me figure out how to make up what I've missed. Somebody else take notes for this person. Anything that you can do to show empathy for that individual who's sick, the more likely they are to leave, because truly they just want to be in bed getting better. They're just too afraid to miss something important sometimes. And I think that's true at work as well. But I'm just focused on students. If students miss classes due to illness, it is going to be their responsibility to communicate with their faculty and to make up the missed classes, lectures, homework, tests. Same is true for students who miss work for on-campus work, that they need to communicate that as soon in advance if they can as possible with the employer on campus. But again, you cannot ask students if they're vaccinated, and you cannot require them to wear masks. The only exception at this point to any of these items on students really rests in our College of Health, Education, and Human Sciences. So I think most of you are aware that Mercy Hospital has put in a mandate for all employees of Mercy Health, as well as individuals who are conducting their clinical assignments there and faculty who are guiding those clinical assignments to be vaccinated. And they must give us the dates on which they were vaccinated, not the actual immunization passport, but just the dates on which they received their vaccinations no later than September the 30th. And you can imagine the difficulty in that. We're not allowed to ask you if you're vaccinated, and yet the students have to have the clinical experiences to graduate. They have to have a certain number of clinical hours conducted to graduate. So I think, unfortunately, we have many students who are in a very difficult position right now. And I really give a lot of kudos to Dr. Julian, to Dr. Corbett, really to everyone in our health sciences area, because they have worked tirelessly to try to explain why it is that we have to comply with Mercy to get that clinical slot for the student. We also we're not the final decision makers on the assignments for those students, and they have to be ready to pivot to a different assignment at any point. And so they're just in a tough position, and hate to be in it, but they are. And so students are making some choices right now, I think. But that is the only exception that I'm aware of to asking them to provide any vaccine information in order to comply with Mercy. And we can come back to that in a minute if you have more questions about it. Employee time off. So at the beginning of the pandemic, when the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act was passed, individuals had a certain amount of time that would not come off of their sick leave or annual leave time if they had to quarantine or care for someone or were in isolation because they themselves were sick. Well, that expired on December the 31st of 2020. The UA system made the decision to continue to extend that paid leave time for up to 80 hours, 2 weeks. And yet we received notice about 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, that the system had ended that program as of August the 1st. And so employees have to use accrued sick leave time, comp time, annual leave, just depending on what they've earned and what they've accumulated, in the event that they are in isolation, quarantine, or caring for immediate family members who have COVID. So this is another difficulty with regard to using the time that you have, and particularly for our faculty members who are only accruing sick leave time, not annual leave or comp time. And so we do not know if this might be something that our board might take on. But at this time, the most current information is that we no longer have the paid additional leave of up to 80 hours. The next question was, are there opportunities for people to work remotely in the event that they are just uncomfortable being in the work environment, or because they have quarantine or isolation issues? At this point, the employees requesting ADA accommodations, that is the best methodology for an individual to use. So as you can imagine, for protection under the law, you must have either a permanent or a temporary disability, or illness that would potentially allow you to be ready for work if you had reasonable accommodations. For many jobs on campus, a reasonable accommodation could be remote work, but it does require a physician's document that tells us the actual reason for having any accommodation, the need for it, what's legally protected, as well as the recommended accommodations. Recommended accommodations doesn't necessarily mean reasonable accommodations. And so the institution would have to review the documentation. HR would receive it for our employees. Students would submit that to our ADA officer. Um, and it would be reviewed, and reasonable accommodations, if possible, would be given for the individual. It's very difficult for someone to work remotely when they have to be hands-on on something on campus, but some jobs will allow people to work remotely. And in those cases where individuals have protected disabilities, temporary or permanent, we hope to accommodate them accordingly. Um, but we are unable to accommodate any request to work remotely due to fear or just discomfort from being on our campus. I've had several questions about travel. At this point, I'm reviewing all international travel requests and really haven't granted any to this point. That doesn't mean that they won't be, but we are reviewing them and checking in with the US State Department with any concerns that they may have with regard to cases in that environment. We would not want someone to be traveling and not be able to get back into the United States in the event of an outbreak somewhere. And we need to make sure that we're aware of the risks and try to mitigate them to the best of our ability. Domestic travel is permitted, but the traveler or travelers must follow all of the requirements of the transit provider, like your airlines, trains, taxis, Ubers, that kind of thing, hotels, restaurants, and a conference, if attending one, any of the rules of the conference. And so you would have to check with every location that you plan to visit or any place you plan to dine, any place you're staying, to know that you understand all of the requirements for pre and post travel, whether that's testing, showing proof of vaccination, wearing masks, etc. Again, those would not be our requirements, but it would be required for you to do so, so that you're fully prepared for that travel and that it doesn't get interrupted. We had questions about COVID data and tracking, who's doing it, how would we know more about it? So at the beginning of the pandemic, we had several requests, Freedom of Information Act requests from journalists who wanted to somehow compare schools and their numbers. And at first we were all doing it very differently, and there was no way to really make an apples to apples comparison with the data. And so actually the U of A system, Nate Hinkle worked hard to come up with a template we would all follow. And so our campus was following that template until the time at which we were told, probably the end of the spring semester, that we really didn't have to publish those numbers anymore now that people were getting vaccines and we were seeing such a decrease in our numbers. Before, we were really fully aware of the impact possibly of the Delta variant. And so we archived the old information that we had. We have not yet been asked to share that information or to create that again and publish it again for this fall. I just quickly had a conversation this morning. Chris Kelly indicated they're ready if they need to do that, but it probably wouldn't be until school starts that they would even be asked for that information again. But HR is the repository of the employee data. So if you had a positive COVID test, you would contact HR with that information. Students would contact the office of the AVC and Dean of Students, Dr. Dave Stevens, to let them know about those positive tests. Sometimes we find out before the person comes to us because we hear it from the state, but it really depends on where the person has the test done and how quickly we get the information. And so we also know that we were using the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences for contact tracing, but we've now, as a state, that's been outsourced to another entity. I don't remember the name of that entity. Dr. Crable will know that, I'm sure. But we've got contact tracing that will continue to happen to identify close cases. Dr. Crable, this might be a good opportunity to ask if you're available to share information with the group, just letting them know about what the requirements are for quarantine or isolation based on vaccination status.
Okay. Probably the most important thing to remember is if you become a close contact, then that's when it really matters whether you've been vaccinated or not. So if you remain asymptomatic, even after exposure, there is no requirement for quarantine. Whereas if you are not vaccinated, then there will be a requirement from the state for quarantine. And as before, at this point, the quarantine can either be 7 days or 10 days, again, assuming absence of symptoms, 7 days with a negative test taken on day 5 or later. That may be moved to day 4 soon, and 10 days without a test. So that's really probably the key. If you actually get a positive test and then are a case, then the isolation would kick in at that point as it did before. So, but it really makes a big difference if you're a close contact, whether or not you've been vaccinated.
So if you have been vaccinated and you're a close contact, but you do not have symptoms, you don't have to quarantine.
That is correct. If there's symptoms, then the quarantine would kick in, and we would also ask for a test, because we are seeing, especially with the new variants, an uptick in what are called breakthrough cases, or people who have previously received a full set of quarantines plus the 2 weeks and are still testing positives. And the newest data is showing that we are not likely to get really sick if we've been vaccinated, but it is very likely that we are able to pass on that virus to other people. And a larger number of people than was the case with the Alpha virus.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. And do you remember the name of the company that will be doing the contact tracing?
Oh, there's two different ones. I'll find that and see it and try to post it.
Okay. Excellent. I just wanted to be sure that people knew if they're hearing from someone that it's credible, that it's a company that's been contracted by the state versus something that's not. We get too many of those phone calls in a day, I know.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Excellent. Thank you. Events and activities. There were several questions posed about resuming in-person activities and meetings. We'll do that as often as possible. You can see from today that we had no idea how many people to expect to log in for something so quickly, and made the decision to make this through Zoom so that it could also be recorded. However, many meetings are happening in person, activities are happening in person, and so people participating in those types of things should not be asked if they've been vaccinated, and they should not be required to wear masks. We will not limit the attendance at the on-campus events only to those who are vaccinated. That was a question, like, can we say this is only open to vaccinated people? And we cannot do that. Outside hosts who are planning events on campus should not mandate masks or vaccinations for participation because it's happening on our campus. We may get different guidance about that as we kind of move into these new days, but that's our current understanding. They should not certainly expect for us to be able to accommodate social distancing or for that to be automatic. So because we're returning things mostly to face at full capacity, we may or may not have an opportunity to accommodate them with something with social distancing. Of course, you can still take temperatures and ask people who have a temp over a certain degree Fahrenheit, 100.4, I think it is, to please go and be tested or perhaps not attend an event. Future communications, I was asked, how will we have guidance in the future? How will we know what's happening? I do plan to host another open forum, hopefully this week, for our students. So this was strictly identified as an employee communication. Students have lots of different types of questions, so we'll definitely host one for students and their families if they choose to participate. And as information about the outcome of the special session becomes available to us, I will definitely share that information with you, particularly as it does or doesn't relate to higher education or any changes for us. We'll keep our COVID-19 website up to date as best we possibly can with changing information. And we will be hosting more open forums, but we definitely will host one for our faculty members who are not on contract, who may choose not to log into a session between now and when University Days occurs. So I believe we have one set for 3 p.m. on August the 19th for our faculty who are just returning on contract that day for University Days. So that is our plan for future communication. So I'm going to get rid of my sharing, and I have to put my cheaters on just to stop sharing. That's how much I've been looking at the computer these days. So I'm going to open it up to any other questions that you may have. And I know we shared a lot of information, but ultimately appreciate that you may have lots of other things that we haven't considered. And trust me, you may have to accept, I just don't know yet as an answer. We may have to go and get and gather information for you. Okay, Janet Renwick, I see your hand up.
My concern is if we have students that are in our classes and they're complaining that they're not socially distanced from others, and they ask for either online instruction or something else, what's our plan for dealing with those kinds of requests from students?
Yeah, so again, we're going to be sending out a lot more information between now and when school starts, making sure students understand that we've been asked to be face-to-face this fall, and that means that it's full capacity. And so they can't come with the expectation of a distance in classroom environments unless it's possible. I mean, if you can accommodate it in your classroom and you choose to do so, great. I just can't guarantee it because of the class sizes, the number of classrooms we have, and demand. I would love to be so flooded with new students and more students that there's no chance we could do that. But I also know that that's not what you want to hear, to be able to communicate a message to them of safety in that classroom environment. So we're a bit at odds where we know that distance may be helpful, and yet we can't guarantee it. It's just important for them to know in advance so that they make choices when they come.
But are you saying that faculty would not be bullied? I mean, talking about faculty being bullied as far as wearing masks and people being bullied as far as being vaccinated. What I'm afraid is that students are going to bully us as far as, well, why can't you do that for me? And why can't I stay at home and watch this online?
So the truth is, we are communicating that things are going to return to face-to-face and in classrooms that have full regular occupancy. Faculty cannot be expected to accommodate both methodologies and both modalities of face-to-face and online. We're not expecting it. And so if someone comes to the classroom and wants to know why, you can absolutely point them to any of the other guidance they're receiving before school starts, to the open forum that we're having for our students, as well to our COVID-19 FAQ documents to show we're not expected to be able to do all these things. We'd love to work with you. If you have to miss class because you're ill, obviously we want you to make things up, choose a partner to help take notes. I mean, day one of the class for classroom management, I'd probably say, do you have someone in the classroom that if you're not well or you cannot be here for some reason, that this can be your classroom buddy? Doesn't have to be your friend. You don't even have to know each other. You just have to exchange contact information so that person could take notes for you, or make me aware that you're not going to be here before class begins, or accommodate that. So very similar to the expectations we have had prior to COVID. If I had to miss it's a great story. I missed more than a week of classes because my senior year of college, I got the chicken pox. I was an RA in a residence hall, and another resident on my floor needed to have a sick sack, like dinner thing, delivered. So I'm like, yeah, sure, I had it when my sister did. In fact, my mother put me in bed with my sister. hoping I would just get it over with. Like I must be immune or something. So I took dinner to that young woman. She went home the next morning, so I barely had contact with her. And sure enough, I got the chicken pox. I had pox in places I didn't even know I had places. I missed more than a week of school. I had to go make it up. I did. It was hard work. It was terrible. And I didn't even feel good at all, but I had to do it. I think that this is not the same. I'm not equating chickenpox and COVID, but it will be a similar response. Nobody would expect that faculty can do everything and be all things to all people. Or at least I would hope none of you do, because that's not possible. So Jen, I think that's the best response I can give right now, is it will make sure that that's widely communicated. Megan, I see your hand next.
Yes, so you had mentioned filing for ADA accommodations for anyone that might need to quarantine but work from home. Is there going to be any kind of communication that is sent out about how to go about doing that, when that needs to happen, kind of what the policies are on that? That's obviously new. And so, I mean, I have somebody quarantining now. And so do they need to do that now?
Okay.
That's just,
I am so glad you asked this question, because it gives me
Yeah.
an opportunity to clarify my earlier statement. And so you do not have to complete something for ADA accommodations for quarantine or isolation situation. If someone has to quarantine and they don't have symptoms, they feel well, and you can allow them to work from home, that's okay. They don't have to go through an ADA accommodation. What I'm suggesting though is that for individuals who are more susceptible to illness due to a temporary or permanent disability protected by law, that one of the options that they have is to go forward and make an ADA accommodation request.
thank you for that clarification. I
Sure,
was
no,
very
I'm not-
confused. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. I didn't
No,
mean
it's okay.
but I appreciate the opportunity to get that clarified for everyone on the call. But again, your best resource for all things employee and ADA is our Office of Human Resources. They're the repository for all of that information. They also understand the very confidential nature of the things you may be sharing with them as they go about determining reasonable accommodation. So I just wanted to make that clear, that that's not something you have to share, particularly not any diagnosis that you have. So, great. Rachel. Oh, and you are muted.
I have questions from the chat if you're ready.
I have never been more ready.
Okay. So will plastic barriers still be available in classrooms?
Yes, I believe they're all still in the same places where they were this past semester. Let me say this, if they are not, I would be very surprised. I don't think anyone has gone around taking anything down. I think our expectation was to leave them in place. If you get to a classroom that did have plexiglass or a plastic framework of some kind for protection and it's not there, please contact our plant operations team to have it restored. It shouldn't have been removed. But Carrie Tucker, mask model extraordinaire, can also just be double checking with plant ops and have a discussion with them in advance. Okay.
There are a couple questions about students. So what to do if a student who has anxiety is afraid to return to campus? And then also, what if a student asks for alternate instruction for another reason?
Okay. So in terms of anxiety, we certainly have several resources to share with them. Again, it's most important for people to know what to expect when they arrive. One of the reasons for anxiety, but not always, but occasionally the reason for anxiety is just unfamiliarity and not knowing what to expect. And so making sure we communicate with our students about what to expect in advance and what they will see in classrooms and what they should or shouldn't be asked. Those kinds of things will be helpful to reducing anxiety. We do have campus counseling. We have our Academic Success Center where they can go for additional help and support. We certainly have our Office of our AVC and Dean of Students where they can work with the students. Ultimately, that's our best option, is to use our on-campus resources because that's exactly why they're available. You had a second portion to that question besides anxiety.
Right, so if they ask for alternate instruction, either if they are quarantining, I think you already covered that, but just to be clear.
Right. Again, you know, almost similar to what we did pre-pandemic, get a classroom buddy system. Make sure that you've met somebody on the first day of class and exchanged contact information. Certainly, we know our classes have a lot of available options with regard to sending messages through Blackboard, through group chats, classroom environments that are online. And so as you create these communities of learners within the classrooms, encouraging them to share information, to find a buddy who will take notes for them if they have to miss a class, that's great. And, you know, we encourage, and our faculty are tremendous. I mean, very supportive and caring people. And so to the best of their ability, I know that even if I said, you don't have to do anything for these people, they're still going to say, well, let me see how I can help. I'm not going to count you down on a late grade. I know you didn't feel well, but they do that anyway. And so my sense is that across the board, we have people who will be very caring for our students. But ultimately, I'm not asking our faculty members to offer 2 modalities for learning for this fall.
Another follow-up to something you mentioned earlier, if they have in their syllabus that faculty will have their office hours completely online, is that okay for it to be exclusively online?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we had that conversation with the faculty senate. They were, they give way more hours than anyone's ever been required to give office hours now that technology is so prevalent. I think it's actually true that our faculty are available to students in a variety of different ways in more hours than we ever will understand. So whether that's on social media or on Zoom or having a you know, navigate meetings scheduled, or using Blackboard Collaborate for a quick meeting, or Zoom. Again, our accounts are continuing on Zoom. That obviously we expect that faculty could easily conduct these conversations online. There are some faculty who will recognize that they may just have hands-on things that they want to demonstrate. The students who come to their classes may say, I just have no idea how this formula works or how to do this in the lab. I wouldn't expect necessarily for faculty to drop everything and go to a lab and pull out some chemicals to work with a student. I'd expect them to talk it through, go back to lecture. And so that's really what we expect, and they can do that online. And they do have to publish, according to the resolution, their particular policies that they choose to utilize in their syllabi. And so, you know, again, well, I'll just, I'm looking straight across my screen, but like Terry Wells could say in syllabi, these are my hours of availability, here's how to contact me. She might just say, you know, I'm on email these days and hours, I'm on Zoom these days and hours, feel free to log in, here's my login. And ask any questions you have at that point, and then be able to demonstrate online something that the student needs, or to work through a problem.
Okay. So if a faculty member either doesn't have sick time accrued or wants to avoid using their sick time, can they pivot temporarily if they have to quarantine?
So I'll speak to this from personal experience. I don't have any problem with that. We have faculty way before the pandemic who traveled, who would go to national conferences, who would, you know, have reasons that they were not in classes, and or they became sick and just couldn't make it to class. And we didn't even have all the technology at that point that we have today. I want to take this moment to just, again, thank all of our IT folks on campus. They have just done tremendous amounts of work to order equipment, and we've still got some Wi-Fi hotspots, I believe, that are available if people have to work remotely and do not have any internet capacity. We know some people who are in rural areas that just don't have good or consistent internet in their areas. And so we have some Wi-Fi hotspots I believe we can add to that if we need to. We have laptop computing that makes it very mobile. We can carry our office and classroom with us, is pretty cool. We will be in competition with every other university and school in the country if we begin to order a bunch of new equipment right this second. So you will have to be patient in the event that there is something that you need that we do not have on hand and can't just issue to you directly. But if there is something that you need in order to conduct your classes remotely, or to facilitate that in some way on the off chance that you become ill and are not available, I really encourage you to put in a work request through ServiceNow to IT to make that request. And they'll be in contact with you to determine what it is that you need and to see if there is a way to accommodate you.
Okay. There are some faculty who are concerned that university days could be a potential quote super spreader event.
Okay. I appreciate that. So the question is, so what are we doing about it? I know that the University Days events that are happening on Thursday for sure are all happening online, or at least that's what I've been reassured of. So my big, grand speech to the faculty, as well as all the other fabulous better speakers, the vice chancellors and others who are speaking in the morning, and our professional development sessions, I believe, that are happening that day, where you can select from within those that are being offered. Those will all be happening online. I cannot speak to what will happen on Friday, though I have not seen those schedules, so I don't know if Dr. Hale might want to speak to that, or.
Well, I meet with the deans tomorrow, so we'll determine tomorrow how they're going to do it. Some of them has planned to do it face-to-face, but with the pandemic worse now, the new variant, they were probably going to pivot to Zoom, but we'll know tomorrow afternoon.
Okay, thank you. I do believe.
I've
that-
already,
Sorry, Dr. Hankins.
yes, we were just talking about that, Dr. Macon, Dr. We're talking about doing the virtual for the morning session for the college, just this afternoon. That's probably the direction we'll go in the morning.
Okay.
Hello?
Dr. Hankins, just so that you know, it was a little bit difficult to understand you, so I do not encourage you to do yours from that location.
Yeah,
But
I won't do that.
if that's an on-campus location, we need to help you out with an access spot there, I think. But ultimately, yeah, we know that this is not a perfect modality, and it will be the best that we can make it for Friday. I do agree that although we'd love to see each other face-to-face for everything, we also know that there is no way we can have this many people who are gathered for opening events and do so with any distance or without requiring some additional things. So we'll just do it as safely as we can do it.
Have we made any progress on the possibility of adding air purification systems to buildings?
Okay, this is Hayes Carrie Tucker, the new Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration Day. Mr. Tucker, I don't know that you know, but I'll just ask if you either have any information on this, or if you have the ability just to look into it after this, and we can update people.
Thank you, Dr. Riley. Hi, everyone. Yes, we will look into it. I know Mr. Campbell has looked into some potential room ionization process. I just got to get back with him and see where we stand on that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tucker hasn't been here for 4 weeks yet, so that was really throwing one at him. But I appreciate you for checking into that for us, for sure. I know we do have some older facilities where retrofitting would have been incredibly difficult. I'll just put that out there, and know that they've been very careful about cleaning protocols, but it's really air circulation and handling that's most concerning.
And the last question from the chat so far is, are students aware that attendance can be enforced? They need to provide proof in the case of absences. Will this be emailed or will they find out when they read their syllabi?
So I think part of our intent to communicate with the students in advance is to communicate some of these expectations. And certainly we know that we have a student health clinic on our campus that's open and available to our students and really makes it very convenient for them to go and seek medical attention, but also to have the ability to get medical excuses for classes when that's needed. It is a bit more challenging, I think, to prove up a quarantine situation based on close contact. Dr. Crable might be able to, or sorry, Dr. Stevens, either of you might be able to share more about what the students receive when they learn they've been close contacts and should quarantine. Isolation is different. They've got a positive case. They can provide that document to the university, but could you talk a bit more about those protocols to follow and how people will receive communication from us?
So when a student is contacted by a contact tracer, they will typically receive a phone call. And then that phone call is followed up with an email. And it's sort of a form email with the Arkansas Department of Higher Education logo at the top. So it's a pretty formalized and familiar document to me and to Dr. Crable at this point. And it will provide the student with a detailed set of instructions, and also will allow this, let the student know about their quarantine period when it's possible for them to leave quarantine. And so that's how they will typically get that information. We will also receive that information if the student indicates that they are a student at the university, or if we put the student in as being a close contact or a positive case through the Arkansas Department of Health. I believe Dr. Crable often will receive a copy of that document, and therefore we have that information on file, and we know what the student, what the student situation is. Very frequently in the past, this past spring, I would then communicate with Shirley Carter in the provost office, and Ms. Carter and the rest of the administrative staff over there were happy to share information with the faculty of the students so that they would be fully aware of the student's situation. And I believe that, that's the process that we intend to continue with. Dr. Crable,
Dr. Stevens, did you talk about also adding the academic advisor to those messages?
Yes, you're absolutely correct. We did talk about adding the academic advisor and the AC from the department where the student is majoring. So, or the college. I apologize. Yeah, that's a good point. So we want to keep us. Obviously, we want to maintain confidentiality, but we also want to make sure that the faculty and the staff who support the student are up to date on the student's condition, and that way they can potentially reach out and be helpful to the student.
I've been asked a couple of times about the rate of vaccinations among our students and our employees. And while I don't think that came up in the set of questions that was sent in advance, I thought I would just mention here that the information that we could receive about the employees or students being vaccinated is very limited. We could submit a list of all of our employees and students to Arkansas Division of Higher Education. They could go through a process of telling us what percentage of those individuals are vaccinated. But the limitation of that information is they can only tell us who's been vaccinated in the state of Arkansas. So for those individuals who traveled anywhere else to become vaccinated, we would not have that information. And so we might think it's a lower percentage than the reality. And I'm not sure what it would prove. or tell anyone about us or our students or faculty about the percentages. I'm not sure what exactly we would be able to do with that information anyway, but it would not be individualized or even down to a department level. Like I couldn't tell you how many people in a particular college or unit or division of our campus are vaccinated or are not vaccinated. It would just be the entire campus.
And Dr. Riley, to underscore that, early in the process, Oklahoma opened up several large vaccine clinics quite early in the process, and we advertised those because they made it clear they would include Arkansas residents. And so we don't have any way of accounting for those either.
Right. Thank you. James Benjamin.
Hi, go ahead and lower my hand here too while I'm thinking about it. For those of us who are leading committees of various sorts, do we have the option, if the committee members agree to it, to hold our meetings virtually for the semester?
Oh,
And-
absolutely. Sure.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was clarified.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we've got a number of tools at our disposal, including this one or Microsoft Teams, just depending on the members of any committees. So dependent upon the purpose of the committee, it would seem to me that having online meetings is actually much more convenient. Takes into account that people do travel for work or may have limited availability or they're rushing from one meeting to another. I have certainly been able to participate in more organizations around our community as a result of most things being held online, when I don't have to worry about rushing to get there on time or rushing back to campus for a meeting. So it's actually allowed me to be a much more active participant in a lot of things to have those online meetings.
Yeah.
So
I
I
agree.
also realized I was on the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors in the city of Van Buren and only had one meeting face-to-face with them in the last year and a half.
Well, curriculum committee, be on notice that I will be polling you guys shortly about whether how you want to proceed, and then I will just simply go with whatever you want. All right.
Excellent.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for asking. That's a great question that wasn't posed. Trying to check to see if I've got more hands up or questions or concerns. I can just wait. Truly, if you don't have questions, I don't intend to keep you all day. I just want to make sure that everyone who has questions has an opportunity to pose them and to get the answers that they need for as we go into this semester. I would never have guessed when I started here, in all seriousness, that we would be at the point where we are as a university. We've been tested and challenged in ways that we should never have had to be. And, we still can look around us and see that the people that we count on, rely on, care about, are here working and doing their very best work every day, even when it isn't what they think is their very best work. We're a lot harder on ourselves than the people who around us are hard on us. And so you all need to show each other grace, but show yourselves grace as well. It's important to remember that we are human. It is okay to be worried and fearful in a global pandemic. It is okay to feel exhausted. It is okay to feel like, am I at the end of my rope here? I just don't know how much more of this I'm going to be able to do. I've read an awful lot about that in social media forums, in the Chronicle of Higher Education. I mean, you name it, that people are sort of at the end of a rope and not sure how to pull that knot together to hang on. For those individuals, ask for help. We'll make the knot for you if you need us to. That's what we do for each other. We'll help you hold on because we want you here. We don't want you to go anywhere else if that's possible. We have seen a lot of movement in higher education. I've talked to colleagues who are just having massive numbers of people who are leaving their institutions, either because there's legislation in place that they don't agree with, or because they perceive that the grass is greener on the other side. It's just different grass. That's all it is. So we just need to water ours and tend to it the best we can, and love where we are while we are here and take care of each other. I think that's the most I could ask from anyone, and you ought to be expecting that from me as your chancellor. So I hope I'm delivering on that. If I'm ever not, tell me. Because I also need to know your perceptions and your needs, and I'm accountable to you. Not just the other way around. We're all accountable to each other to make this the best. So I will look back at the chat one last time, as I think people may think of other things. How's enrollment looking? We're down a bit. And again, it's very volatile. Every day is a different day with regard to who gets registered. And I will say that we are really up on transfer students, to the point that I had to send Andy Johnson a message and say, like, what you doing? No, don't stop doing it. Keep it up. But what's happening? I mean, this is awesome. And, I think they have, just by digging in and learning in the process as a team, and especially with Slade and, Megan's hard work in communicating with people as well, just a kind of a new team working well together and firing on all pistons. They're out finding any areas where they can take down barriers. For those of you watching the Olympics and watching those hurdlers, imagine how easy your lane would be if there weren't hurdles in it and everybody else had them. That should be us. We need to take down those hurdles as often as we can so that people can reach that finish line at the fastest pace that they can. And so that's been a blessing here and a pleasure to get to see them at work and finding ways to do that. We do have a lot of students that we're very concerned about just re-enrolling, but that's across pretty much every institution in the state. We had a brief conversation with the coordinating board, and at the end, one of the members of that board said, "How's enrollment?" And it was like crickets, silence. Nobody wants to say how their enrollment is. And, I must say, props to Robin Bowen at Arkansas Tech University, because she spoke up first when it was obvious no one else wanted to do so, and said, our enrollment's down for this fall. And I quietly, alone, said, ditto, but no one heard that. We also had, a couple of other colleagues, University of Arkansas at Fayetteville, said, oh, we're pretty flat. They were last year too. And we know that we have a growing pipeline of people from our corridor up through Northwest Arkansas. We're going to go get some of them using some of those great strategies that we're talking about. I'm excited about that. And there's plenty to share. So I don't feel like we're cannibalizing anybody else's great enrollment. We're going to share them, and just to get the students who are great for us and who will do well with us. I do know that UCA said that they were probably a little flat, possibly a little up in some areas. So we could say the same. It is really difficult to think about the fact that our two master's programs are in education and in healthcare at a time when people are like, do I ever want to work in education or healthcare? So that's really tough. I think, again, we can role model that you can do both and be an exceptional professional and do so with a lot of grace. And, nursing is our top major for undergraduates. It kind of goes back and forth in the years between nursing, biology, business. And so sometimes nursing will edge that out, probably not in the next year or so, simply because, again, people are worried about even their kids saying they want to be nursing or healthcare majors. So it's just a tough time. But this too will rebound. Those of you who've been in higher education for as long as I have or longer have watched the roller coaster. You've ridden it, you've been at the top, you see the beautiful view, and you forget for just a second that it's going to plunge back down and you might lose your lunch. But then you're going to ride it back up. And so the truth is, the only part of the roller coaster I like is when it's, not quite so bumpy. It's just not always that way. So let's enjoy the ride. Let's enjoy the view when we can get it, and let's rebound when we need to. That's who will be, what we'll do. I'm not concerned about that. I really appreciate all of you participating today. I've way overspent my time. We're at 4:20, and I know some of you may want to, kind of process this in your offices or have time to respond to things that have come in while we've been talking. But I just want you to know I appreciate you and all the hard work that you're giving and all that will be done between now and when school starts. Again, expect to get lots more messages from me, and happy to participate in other open forums. I will say that when the open forum announcement comes out for students, you will also receive that information. The students did not get the ability to log in for the link really for our employees, but you can, of course, if you choose to, log in so that whatever the students are hearing, if you would like to hear it directly at the same time, you may. The recording will be sent to all of you at the conclusion, so you will have access to it. And this one for employees, I'll send to all employees. So, but the one for students, I'll send to students and employees so that you also can see it at your own leisure in the event that you would like to. But many of the topics you brought up today, I'll be certain that we are talking with our students openly about that and trying, I hope, to help with any of the fears and concerns or anxieties they're feeling. And more importantly, that some of their parents are feeling. I feel like I'm a mom 24/7, would wrap all of my kids up in bubble wrap to keep them safe. And yet that's not how they want to live life. That's not the life I would have wanted to live either. So I try really hard not to be that chancellor as well. So if you all want to be a part of that conversation, you're welcome to be. I really would welcome it. So you all have a wonderful day. I appreciate talking to all of you. If you have any other questions or concerns, don't hesitate to send them our way, even just through Chelsea. She'll make sure that I get them and she can respond to you, particularly if you hope for any kind of confidentiality in the question that you're asking. Don't hesitate. Trust me, I've asked her not to share the person sending any questions, so that you have the ability to do that if you'd like, or feel free to share them with me directly. I'm happy to respond if you'd like that too. So thanks so much. Have a great afternoon.